Mortal Kombat has some of the most unhinged creepypastas in gaming history, from cursed cartridges that physically won't eject from your console, to demonic editions that blur the line between game violence and actual reality. Today, I'm breaking down the most infamous ones and everything that makes them disturbing, starting with an entry that technically shouldn't even be on this list. Creepypasta, The Fighters, Hashaku-sama. Let me be honest with right out of the gate, this one is barely a Mortal Kombat creepypasta, but it's so bizarre that I couldn't get it out, and once you hear the details, you'll understand. Hashaku-sama is a modern Japanese urban legend that originated on the anonymous forum 2channel, basically Japan's answer to Slender Man. She's described as an 8-foot-tall pale woman dressed in white who haunts rural countryside villages and targets young. Her signature calling card is a low, repetitive sound that goes po, 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 already unsettling on its own. Her only connection to anything resembling Mortal Kombat is a fan-made fighting game called Creepypasta The Fighters, where she appears as a playable character, and her designated rival in that game? A character literally called Sexual Offender Man. So we're already operating at peak internet. But here's where it actually gets dark. Her finishers in the game are genuinely horrifying. The kiss of death causes her opponent to inflate and vomit blood before exploding. The Yukai curse summons spirits that pass directly through the opponent's body, causing internal combustion from the inside out, with the skull separating first. And then there's her backstory. Before becoming a yokai, Hashaku-sama was a mother who lost her child. The kidnappings aren't random predation. She's trying to replace what she lost. That doesn't make it less horrifying. It just makes it deeply uncomfortable because now you understand the grief fueling the monster. This entry is the palate cleanser, the warm-up round. Because if a grieving yokai from a fan-made fighting game is where we're starting, imagine where we're headed when we get to the cartridges that wouldn't let go. Baraka's fingernail mask. This one isn't a creepypasta. It's worse. It's real. Baraka's teeth in Mortal Kombat 2, those jagged nightmare blades jutting out of his face, are not sculpted fangs. They're not custom props. They're press-on acrylic fingernails. The kind you buy at a drugstore. The kind your mom wore to a wedding in 1994. The Midway design team grabbed a pack of salon acrylics, glued them onto the actor's face, and photographed it for the digitized sprites. That's it. That's one of the most iconic monster designs in gaming history, built from beauty supplies and sheer desperation. Here's the thing. In the early 90s, Midway had almost zero budget for creature effects. They were working with real actors, real photography, and whatever random materials they could find in a studio. So, when they needed Baraka to look like a Tarkaton killing machine with rows of razor-sharp teeth, somebody looked at a pack of fake nails and said, yeah, that'll work. And it did. It worked so well that Baraka became one of the most recognizable faces in fighting game history. But knowing the truth changes everything. Once you find out those teeth are acrylic fingernails, you can't unsee it. The design stops reading as fantasy monster and starts reading as something closer to taxidermy. Real human material, rearranged into a predator's mouth. It's not sculpted. It's assembled from pieces of us. The designers made a nightmare out of nothing. And honestly, that's more unsettling than any creepypasta on this list. But speaking of unsettling, let's talk about something the game itself was hiding from you in plain sight. Mortal Kombat Annihilation, original version. This one is genuinely hilarious to me, and I need you to understand why. Mortal Kombat Annihilation came out in 1997 and is already considered one of the worst films of the entire decade. The acting is painful. The CGI looks like it was rendered on a calculator. The plot makes zero sense even by video game movie standards. Critics destroyed it. Fans hated it. It killed the franchise's film ambitions for over 20 years. And somebody looked at all of that and said, you know what this needs? A creepypasta about a secret original version that was even worse. That's the entire premise. There was supposedly a darker, more disturbing cut of Annihilation that got suppressed before the theatrical release. A hidden version with content so extreme it had to be buried. Here's the thing though. There's almost nothing to this one. No coherent story, no protagonist finding a mysterious VHS tape, no specific scenes described, no details about what the darker content actually contained. It exists primarily as a concept entry on fanon wikis, with barely a paragraph of actual substance. It's a creepypasta skeleton with zero meat on the bones. But the reason I'm including it is because the concept itself is psychologically brilliant, even if the execution is non-existent. The idea that bad media was secretly hiding something worse taps directly into how lost media rabbit holes work. We already know Annihilation is a disaster, so our brains naturally accept that a worse version could exist, because the foundation is already broken. It's the same logic that makes deleted scenes and original cuts so appealing to hunt for. If the finished product is this bad, what did they cut? It's just funny that someone applied that logic to a movie that was already a war crime against cinema. But speaking of things that are genuinely unsettling rather than accidentally comedic, the next entry takes us somewhere much darker. Mortal Kombat R, The Lost Beta. beta. This one is different from everything we've covered so far, and I need to be upfront about why. Mortal Kombat R is supposedly a lost development build of a Mortal Kombat game that never reached public release, never made it into official archives, and never appeared in any documented production history. A phantom version of a game that simply doesn't exist, at least not officially, and that's basically it. There's no protagonist stumbling onto a cursed cartridge, no demonic entity crawling through the screen, no friend dying in real life after a fatality. The entire creepypasta is built on a title and a concept: Mortal Kombat R, the Lost Beta. What was in it? Nobody knows. Nobody describes it. Nobody claims to have played it. Here's the thing. That vagueness should make this the weakest entry on the list, and in a lot of ways, it is. But it also taps into something that the other creepypastas can't touch, because the lost media phenomenon surrounding Mortal Kombat is absolutely real. Genuine MK development builds have surfaced over the years containing cut characters, abandoned mechanics, and entire gameplay systems that never made it to retail. Private collectors hold prototype cartridges that the general public has never seen. Beta versions of early MK games have appeared with content that contradicts what we thought we knew about the final products. This isn't speculation. This is documented gaming history, and that's exactly what makes Mortal Kombat R work. You can't definitively prove it doesn't exist. Somewhere in some developer's storage unit or some collector's private archive, there could be a build labeled MKR Gathering Dust. The absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Not when we know for a fact that unreleased Mortal Kombat content is sitting in private hands right now. So yeah, this creepypasta gives you almost nothing to work with. No story, no scares, no details, just a name and the uncomfortable possibility that it might be real. Sometimes the emptiest mystery is the hardest one to dismiss. But if you thought the creepypastas so far have been light on substance, that changes right now, because the next entries are fully realized nightmares with scenes that will genuinely make your skin crawl. Mortal Kombat Satanic Edition. This is where Mortal Kombat creepypastas stop playing around and go full horror fiction, and honestly, it kind of works. The setup is simple. A kid gets a Mortal Kombat cartridge as a gift from his uncle. Nothing weird about that, except the packaging is immediately wrong. The character art on the cover has grotesque facial expressions, twisted and exaggerated beyond anything official. The entire cover is drenched in a blood red tint. It looks like someone redesigned the box art during a fever dream, but the kid plugs it in anyway because of course he does. The title screen is where things escalate fast. The acronym SE on the cartridge, it stands for Satanic Edition, and the game tells you directly. A prompt appears on screen, reading, "You are about to enter the Mortal Kombat Satanic Edition. There will be no going back. Are you sure you're continuing?" That's a consent screen, designed to look exactly like a real game UI element, and that detail is what makes this creepypasta smarter than most, because it uses the language of gaming against you. The character select screen introduces a fighter that doesn't exist in any Mortal Kombat game ever made. Dark Demon, winged, horned, entirely red. When you select him, the text at the top of the screen changes. Choose your player becomes ready to die. Here's where the rules completely break. Dark Demon starts moving on his own. Zero controller input. The character fights independently, executing attacks like it's playing itself. Meanwhile, the protagonist's friend is controlling Sub-Zero on the other side, and he starts physically deteriorating, sweating, exhausted. He says he can feel the cold from Sub-Zero's attacks, and the exhaustion is becoming genuinely painful. Then, the story drops its worst moment. The protagonist wakes up holding their friend's heart, still beating. Ripped directly from his chest, claws grab the protagonist from behind. The room fills with red light. The screen shows an endless pile of half-eaten corpses, and a voice breathing sulfur whispers, "Ready for another game?" The community has never agreed on what actually happened here. One reading takes it literally, full demonic possession through a cursed cartridge. The other interpretation is darker in a different way. The protagonist experienced complete psychological dissociation and committed an actual murder while believing they were still playing a game. The story never confirms either version. That ambiguity is the point, and it's what separates this from the average, and then the game was haunted pasta. But if Satanic Edition blurs the line between game and reality, the next story erases it completely. But if Satanic Edition blurs the line between game and reality, the next story erases it completely. The demonic possessed Mortal Kombat cartridge. The mailman is what makes this one stick. Not the cursed cartridge, not the gore, not the screeching. The mailman, because he shows up at the door in a dark red uniform, hands over the package, and then just stands there, silent, staring. He doesn't explain anything, he doesn't run. He just lingers in the doorway like he's watching something inevitable begin. Let me back up. A guy named Jake finds an online listing for a rare red SNES, a console variant that officially does not exist. No production records, no collector databases, nothing. But Jake's a collector, and the listing is too tempting to pass up. He orders it. A few days later, the package arrives with that deeply unsettling delivery, and inside the box is something worse than a haunted console. There's a letter. I am sorry if I ruined your life. This game console, an MK2, could kill you. It killed my older brother Joe. Play at your own risk. Here's the thing. That letter is a confession from someone who already lost. They watched this thing destroy their family, and instead of burning it, instead of smashing it with a hammer, they packaged it up and sent it to a stranger. That's not a warning. That's a death sentence wrapped in an apology. And Jake plays it anyway, because of course he does. The first few matches look completely normal. Standard MK2 gameplay, nothing out of place, but the longer Jake plays, the worse everything gets. Matches become progressively more brutal and gory, pushing way past anything the original game was capable of rendering. A faint screeching sound starts bleeding through the television speakers. Barely noticeable at first, then impossible to ignore. The difficulty doesn't just increase, it inverts. The game punishes you proportionally for how long you've been engaged with it, as if the cartridge is measuring your commitment and responding with escalating hostility. But here's where it gets really uncomfortable. This isn't just a story about one cursed cartridge sitting on a shelf waiting to be found. The mailman already knows what this thing does. He's seen the letter. He delivered it anyway. That means either something is compelling him to spread it, or he's choosing to. The curse doesn't stay with one owner. It circulates. It gets handed off. Every person who touches this thing becomes part of the chain, and the previous owner's guilt becomes the next owner's death warrant. This is the story where the cursed cartridge concept evolves. It's no longer a weird object you stumble across at a flea market. It's an actively distributed supernatural contagion with a delivery system. And if you think upgrading from haunted game to supernatural chain letter is as dark as these stories get, the next one makes this look like a mild inconvenience. Mortal Kombat 2, The Haunted. This is the one that changed everything, not just for Mortal Kombat creepypastas, but for gaming horror stories as a whole. A guy finds a Mortal Kombat 2 cartridge at a flea market. The vendor gives it to him for free, not discounted, free, because every single person who bought it before came back to return it. Not because the game was broken, because once you put the cartridge into your SNES, it physically would not come out. Multiple owners. Same result. The vendor just wanted it gone, and our protagonist takes it anyway. Here's the thing. That setup works because unlike every other creepypasta protagonist who stumbles into danger blindly, this guy walks in with his eyes open. The vendor literally warns him. He has full informed consent. He chooses to ignore every red flag, and sure enough, the cartridge locks into his SNES exactly like every previous owner described. But the real horror starts when he notices a difficulty option he's never seen before. Above very hard, there's a new setting called realistic. He selects it. The screen goes black for 30 full seconds. Then untranslatable Japanese text floods the display, followed by footage of mutilated bodies and people with empty, bleeding eye sockets frozen in expressions of pure terror. The game transforms after that. Defeated opponents don't disappear between rounds. Their bodies stay on the arena floor. Every fight adds another corpse to the pile. The background shifts blood red. Metal spikes emerge from the walls. And then you notice the worst part. The heads of every fighter you've already beaten appear mounted on those spikes like trophies. Then a pale child appears on screen. No warning. Hollow eye sockets, bleeding. The child pulls out a knife and slits Sub-Zero's arms open, and the protagonist feels it. Not metaphorically. He physically feels searing pain shoot through his own arms while holding the controller. The game is transferring real, tangible pain through the hardware into his body. That detail is the moment this story became a blueprint. The idea that a game could reach through the screen, through the controller, through your hands, and hurt you in the real world. That broke people's brains. Readers who had been casually skimming suddenly stopped and thought, wait, what if that's actually possible? The protagonist survives by grabbing a blunt object and destroying the SNES before the child can finish. Not turning it off. Total destruction of the machine itself. This story built the cursed cartridge template that defined an entire generation of gaming creepypastas. The flea market origin. The object that won't let go. The hidden content that escalates beyond reason. The physical world consequences. Every single one of those tropes traces back here. But if you think a cursed cartridge is the darkest this franchise's creepypastas get, the next one makes this look like a warm-up. Mortal Kombat.exe. This is the one that changed everything. A guy named Lane finds a Mortal Kombat ROM emulator online, and right from the jump, the numbers don't add up. The listing advertises 276 playable characters across every MK version ever made, and 500 different stage selections. Those numbers are absurd. No emulator has ever offered that. No legitimate download would even claim that. But Lane downloads it anyway, because that's what protagonists in creepypastas do. The download takes 4 hours, which for a ROM file is already suspicious, but he lets it finish. He boots it up. selects a stage. And then Shao Kahn's voice comes through the speakers and says, "Good choice, Lane." His speakers are muted. Let me say that again. The speakers are physically muted, and a voice comes through them using his real name. Not a username, not a gamer tag, his actual real-world name. This is the single best moment in Mortal Kombat creepypasta history, and it works because it does something no other MK story had done before. It makes the game aware. Not glitchy, not haunted, aware. The game knows who is sitting on the other side of the screen, and it wants Lane to know that it knows. But here's where it gets genuinely clever. The game contains a friends list. Think about that for a second. A ROM emulator with a social feature. Lane scrolls through it and finds his friend Jordan's name. He selects it. The character Chameleon immediately performs a fatality sequence on screen. Screams of agony blast from the speakers at full volume. The speakers are still muted. The game doesn't care about your volume settings. It doesn't care about your hardware limitations. It operates outside the rules of the machine it's running on. That friends list is one of the most underrated horror mechanics in any creepypasta. It takes something completely mundane, a social feature that exists in every modern platform, and turns it into a targeting system. You're not selecting a friend to play with, you're selecting a friend to die. That same night, Jordan is found dead. Multiple large holes scattered throughout his body, consistent with repeated impalement. The injuries match a fatality, not metaphorically, literally. The wounds look like something from the game performed them in real life. And then comes the detail that makes this story genuinely disturbing beyond standard creepypasta fare. Lane's computer boots up the next morning. The screen displays a message. "Thank you for playing, Lane, but I told you, you will never win." And then the images appear. Close-up photographs of Jordan's wounds. The gouged out eyes, the impalement sites. Every injury documented in photographic detail, displayed on Lane's monitor as if the game had been. As if it had recorded evidence of what it caused. The game didn't just kill Jordan, it took pictures. That implies intent. That implies an audience. The game wanted Lane to see what it did, which means the murder wasn't random supernatural violence. It was a performance, for him. This story matters because it fundamentally rewired what gaming creepypastas could be. Before Mortal Kombat.exe, most gaming horror stories were about haunted cartridges or glitched sprites. This one introduced the idea that the game knows your name. That concept spread everywhere. It became a staple of the entire genre. And the reason it stuck, the reason it still generates genuine unease in comment sections years later, is because the paranoia it created isn't completely irrational. Every internet-connected device you own has access to personal data. Your name, your contacts, your location. The idea that a downloaded file could pull your real name and use it against you touches something that people can't fully dismiss. Multiple YouTube narrations across different channels reproduce the exact same dialogue, the exact same plot beats, word for word. That level of consistency confirms Mortal Kombat.exe as one of the most stable and widely circulated MK creepypastas ever written. It doesn't drift, it doesn't mutate. Every version tells the same story because the story is already perfect. It took a fighting game about ripping spines out and made it personally threatening, and that's the real fatality. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.